I don't need protecting. The words tore from Amara's throat, raw and desperate, echoing in the cavernous silence of his penthouse. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, mirroring the storm inside her. Jin Woo Kwon simply watched her, his expression unreadable. He stood with an unnatural stillness, a predator in a bespoke suit, the city's glittering lights a crown of thorns behind his head. He had orchestrated her life for weeks, a ghost pulling strings she never knew existed, and now he stood before her as if it were the most natural thing in the world, as if owning people was his birthright. She had screamed, accused, and thrown a ridiculously expensive vase against the marble fireplace. It had shattered with a satisfying crash, but the sound had died instantly in the opulent space, swallowed by silk rugs and quiet menace. Nothing she did could touch him. "I am not one of your possessions," she spat, her voice trembling with a fury that was all she had left. And then he did the one thing that shattered her rage into a million pieces of ice. He smiled. It wasn't a smirk or a grin of triumph. It was a slow, sad, devastatingly gentle smile that reached his dark, lonely eyes. It was a smile that said he understood her fear, her anger, her desperate need for independence, and loved her for it anyway. It was a smile that promised to burn down the world for her, whether she wanted him to or not. And in that moment, Amara Jones, a woman who had fought for every scrap of her life, froze, because she realized the man who terrified her was also the only one who had ever truly seen her. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. 6 weeks earlier, the world had been a simpler, grayer place. Amara's life was a predictable rhythm of exhaustion and duty. 12-hour shifts in the emergency room, the constant scent of antiseptic, the bone-deep weariness that settled in her soul after a long night. She moved through the controlled chaos of the hospital like a ghost, efficient and professional, her own needs a distant hum beneath the blare of heart monitors and desperate calls for help. Her apartment, shared with her best friend Chloe, was a small haven of mismatched furniture and unpaid bills stacked neatly on the counter. It was a life lived on the edge of a financial cliff, but it was hers. She had earned it. She had fought for it. Jin Woo Kwan's world was anything but gray. It was a world of sharp lines and muted colors, of steel and glass, and the silent accumulation of power. He lived in the sky, in a penthouse that looked down on the city like a hawk from its eyrie. His life was a legacy, a heavy cloak inherited from his father, stitched with secrets and bound by obligations as old as the city itself. He was the head of the Golden Dragon Syndicate, a position that afforded him everything but the one thing he craved in the hollow hours before dawn: peace. He did not belong in a hospital. His world had its own doctors, men who worked in sterile, anonymous clinics and never asked questions. But Min Jun, his closest friend and second in command, had insisted. A deep gash on his forearm, courtesy of a clumsy negotiation with a rival faction, needed proper attention. A warning, a message. Jin Woo saw it only as an inconvenience. He sat in the stark, fluorescent-lit waiting room of the city's busiest emergency department, feeling exposed and out of place. His tailored suit felt like a costume. Min Jun stood a few feet away, a silent, imposing guard. The air was thick with the scent of sickness and fear, a stark contrast to the clean metallic scent of money and power that usually surrounded him. He hated it. He was counting the seconds until he could leave. And then he saw her. She was arguing with a large, belligerent man whose arm was in a makeshift sling. He was drunk and loud, spitting curses that made other patients flinch. Amara Jones stood her ground, her voice calm but firm, a steady rock in his tide of aggression. She wasn't intimidated, she wasn't dismissive, she was just there, present. Her focus was absolute. "Sir, if you will let me look at your arm, I can help you," she said, her voice a low, soothing melody amidst the discord. Shouting won't make the pain go away. Jin Woo felt something shift inside him, a tectonic plate grinding into a new position. It wasn't her beauty, though he noticed the determined set of her jaw and the exhaustion that shadowed her warm, intelligent eyes. It was her stillness, the quiet strength that radiated from her, an unshakable core of decency in a world of noise and chaos. She wore cheap scrubs and comfortable shoes, yet she possessed more authority than anyone he had ever met. The man lunged, a clumsy, drunken swing. Jinwoo was halfway out of his seat, a cold, protective instinct surging through him, but Minjun's hand on his shoulder stopped him. Before either of them could move, Amara had sidestepped with the easy grace of a dancer, taken the man's good arm, and guided him back onto the gurney with a surprising amount of leverage. "There now," she murmured, her voice losing none of its calm. "Let's just take a look." The world stopped. The noise of the emergency room faded to a dull roar. For Jinwoo, there was only her, a woman with tired eyes and a spine of steel, taming a monster with nothing but her will. He felt a sudden, sharp, and utterly foreign ache in his chest. It was a feeling he couldn't name, a profound sense of recognition, as if a part of his soul he never knew was missing had just walked into the room. "Minjun," he said, his voice barely a whisper. He never took his eyes off her. "Find out who she is." Minjun glanced from the nurse back to his boss, a flicker of surprise in his usually impassive eyes. He had known Jinwoo his entire life, had seen him command rooms of dangerous men, had seen him show mercy and mete out punishment with the same cold detachment. He had never, not once, seen this look on his face, this raw, unguarded focus. It was the look of a man who had just found his reason for breathing. "Her name," Jinwoo repeated, his voice harder now, an order cloaked in a request. "I want to know everything." Amara felt the weight of a stare. It was a common feeling in her line of work: grief-stricken relatives, anxious patients, bored security guards. But this was different. This was a heavy, physical presence on her skin, a focused intensity that made the hairs on her arms stand up. She glanced across the crowded room, her eyes scanning past the chaos until they landed on him. He was sitting in the corner, a man who was so clearly out of place he might as well have been an alien. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her car, tailored to fit a body that was lean and hard. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and a faint scar traced the line of his jaw, the only imperfection in a face that was otherwise devastatingly handsome. But it was his eyes that held her. They were dark, bottomless, and fixed on her with an unnerving, possessive heat. Their gazes locked for a fraction of a second. A jolt, sharp and electric, shot through her. It wasn't attraction, not exactly. It was something more primal, a warning, a question. She felt an inexplicable blush creep up her neck and broke contact, turning her attention back to her patient with a professionalism she didn't feel. But she could still feel his eyes on her, a brand she would carry with her long after her shift was over. Jinwoo watched her walk away, the crisp efficiency of her movements a thing of beauty. The world had snapped back into focus, but it was different now, sharper, more vibrant. He had a new center of gravity. The doctor finally called his name, but Jinwoo barely registered the sterile procedure of stitches and bandages. His mind was elsewhere, replaying the moment her eyes had met his. The flash of surprise, of awareness. He had seen a flicker of the same fire that he felt. Or maybe he had just imagined it. It didn't matter. He had seen her. And Jinwoo Kwon always got what he wanted. The next day, Amara was walking home from a grueling 14-hour shift, her feet aching and her mind a numb fog. As she turned onto her street, she saw it. A sleek black car, the kind that whispered of unimaginable wealth, was parked in front of her rundown apartment building. It looked as out of place as a panther in a petting zoo. A man in a dark suit, Minjun, though she didn't know his name then, got out of the driver's side and opened the back door. Jinwoo emerged from the car, looking as impeccable as he had in the emergency room. Amara's tired brain struggled to catch up. She stopped dead on the sidewalk, clutching her worn tote bag to her chest. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "Amara Jones," he said. Her name on his lips was a low, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate in the air between them. It wasn't a question. "I'm Jinwoo Kwon. We saw each other at the hospital last night." "I see a lot of people at the hospital," she said, her guard firmly up. This was wrong. This was deeply, fundamentally wrong. "How do you know my name? How do you know where I live?" "I have my ways," he said, a statement of fact, not a boast. He gestured to a small, impossibly elegant box in his hand. "This is for you. A token of my appreciation for your hard work." She stared at the box, then back at his face. "I was doing my job. I don't accept gifts from patients. Or whoever you are." "I'm not a patient anymore," he said, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "I'm a man who was impressed by your strength." Every instinct she had screamed danger. This man oozed a kind of power she had only seen in movies, a quiet, absolute confidence that the world would bend to his will. And he was here, on her doorstep. "Look, Mr. Kwon," she said, her voice sharp with exhaustion and annoyance. "I don't know what you think this is, but I'm not interested. Please leave." She tried to walk past him, but he moved with her, a silent, fluid motion that blocked her path without touching her. "At least have dinner with me," he said. It wasn't a plea. It was a gentle command. "One dinner." "No," she said, the word a shield. "This is creepy. Following me home is creepy. Is it even legal?" His smile widened slightly, reaching his eyes this time. It transformed his face, making him look younger, almost human. "Probably not," he admitted. The honesty was disarming. "But I find I don't much care about the law when I want something." The statement hung in the air, a chilling confession wrapped in a charming smile. This was her chance to run, to scream, to call the police. But she was frozen by a morbid curiosity, and a tiny, treacherous part of her was intrigued by the sheer audacity of it all. "I said no," she repeated, her voice firmer this time. She pushed past him and fumbled for her keys, her hands shaking slightly. She could feel his gaze on her back, as intense as it had been in the hospital. She slammed the door to her building behind her and leaned against it, her heart hammering against her ribs. She didn't look back. She didn't have to. She knew he was still out there, a patient, powerful predator who had decided she was his. The pursuit had begun. For the next 2 weeks, Jinwoo's presence was a constant, unnerving shadow in her life. It began with flowers. Not just a bouquet, but an entire florist's shop delivered to her apartment, filling the tiny space with the overwhelming scent of lilies and roses until she and Chloe could barely breathe. Chloe was ecstatic. Amara was furious. She had the delivery service take them all back. Then came the car service. A black town car, identical to the one from the first night, would be waiting for her after every shift. The driver, a polite but stoic man, would simply say, "Mr. Kwon sent me, to ensure you get home safely." The first few times, she refused, opting for the long, cold walk to the subway. But after a week of grueling shifts, her feet aching and her body screaming for rest, she finally gave in. She sat in the plush leather interior, feeling like a hypocrite, hating the comfort, hating him for knowing her weaknesses. He never approached her directly again. He was more clever than that. He learned her routine, her life, with a terrifying precision. When her ancient coffee maker finally died, a new, top-of-the-line espresso machine appeared on her doorstep the next morning. When she mentioned to Chloe that her mother's nursing home costs were going up, she received an anonymous check in the mail for the exact amount of the increase. She tore the check into tiny pieces. "Are you insane?" Chloe shrieked, watching the confetti of their financial salvation flutter into the trash can. "Amara, that was a miracle!" "It wasn't a miracle, it was a leash," Amara snapped, pacing their small living room. "He's trying to buy me, to own me. He thinks because he has money, he can just insert himself into my life and fix things. I don't want to be fixed, and I don't want to be bought." So he's rich and a little intense. Is that a crime? Chloe argued, ever the pragmatist. He's handsome, he's clearly obsessed with you, and he hasn't done anything threatening. He's just persistent. It is threatening, Amara insisted, her voice rising. He knows where I work, where I live. He knows about my mom. That's not romantic, Chloe, that's stalking. But even as she said it, a part of her was confused. His actions were invasive, yes, but they weren't malicious. They were protective, calculated, as if he were identifying every sharp edge in her life and trying to sand it down. The feeling was as seductive as it was terrifying. For the first time in her adult life, someone was trying to take care of her, and she hated how much a part of her wanted to let him. Jinwoo received the reports from Minjun with a quiet sense of satisfaction and a growing frustration. The flowers were returned. The check was destroyed. She used the car service, but only when she was at her absolute limit. She was resilient, stubborn. She was everything he'd thought she was. She is not like the others, Hyung, Minjun said one evening, using the respectful term for an older brother as they sat in Jinwoo's office overlooking the city. Money does not impress her. It insults her. I know, Jinwoo said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. It's a language she doesn't speak. I have been trying to court her like a businessman closing a deal, an acquisition. He looked out the window at the millions of lights twinkling below. She was down there somewhere, living her small, difficult, honorable life. She is not a deal to be closed. He had spent his life surrounded by people who wanted something from him. His power, his money, his name. Amara wanted none of it. In fact, she actively rejected it. It was the most fascinating, infuriating thing he had ever encountered. He had to change his approach. He had to show her the man, not the syndicate. He had to find a language she understood. The opportunity came a week later in the form of a crisis. Amara got a call from her mother's nursing home. Her mother, whose memory was a flickering candle in the wind of dementia, had had a fall. She was okay, just shaken, but the facility was using the incident to push for her to be moved to a more expensive specialized care wing. It was a cost Amara couldn't possibly afford. She spent the night staring at her ceiling, the weight of the world crushing her. She had worked so hard to give her mother the best care she could, and it still wasn't enough. For the first time, she felt truly hopeless, defeated. The next day, she went to visit her mother. As she walked down the sterile corridor, she heard a sound she hadn't heard in years, her mother's laughter, genuine, happy laughter. Amara froze in the doorway of the common room. Her mother was sitting at a small table, a half-finished puzzle in front of her, and sitting across from her was Jinwoo Kwon. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was in a simple dark sweater and jeans, looking startlingly normal. He was talking to her mother, pointing to a puzzle piece, his voice low and gentle. He wasn't treating her like a patient or a confused old woman. He was just talking to her, and she was responding, her eyes clear and focused in a way Amara hadn't seen in a very long time. Amara stood in the doorway, her heart a painful knot in her chest. He hadn't sent a check. He hadn't made a phone call and thrown his weight around. He had come himself. He had spent his time. He had given her mother the one thing money couldn't buy, a moment of genuine human connection. He looked up then as if sensing her presence, and his eyes met hers. There was no triumph in his gaze, no "I told you so." There was only a quiet vulnerability, a silent question. "Do you see?" She walked over to the table, her anger and suspicion washed away by a confusing wave of gratitude. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice softer than she intended. "Eleanor was telling me about her garden," he said, his smile small and genuine. He gestured to her mother. "She has a remarkable memory for flowers." "Mom?" Amara said, her voice catching. Her mother looked up, her eyes bright. "Amara, dear, this nice young man was just helping me with the sky." She pointed a frail finger at the blue puzzle pieces. Later, Jinwoo walked Amara to the nursing home's small, manicured garden. The silence between them was no longer tense, but filled with unspoken things. "How did you know?" Amara finally asked, hugging her arms to her chest. "I know that you care about your mother more than anything," he said simply. "And I know that what she needs isn't always about money." He paused, looking at the perfectly pruned rose bushes. "I also spoke to the facility director. The issue of her care has been resolved. Permanently. She will receive the best of everything, at no additional cost to you." Amara stopped walking. "You bought the nursing home, didn't you?" The question was flat, devoid of accusation. It was just a statement of fact. He didn't deny it. He just looked at her. "I told you. I want to take care of the things that worry you." She should have been furious. It was the ultimate act of control, of power. He had literally bought the building that housed her mother, but all she felt was a profound, overwhelming sense of relief. The mountain of debt and worry that had been her constant companion for years had just vanished. He hadn't just thrown money at the problem, he had solved it completely and irrevocably. And he had done it after first showing her a kindness she couldn't deny. "Why?" she whispered, the question she had been avoiding for weeks. "Why me?" Jinwoo turned to face her fully, his dark eyes intense. "Because when I saw you in that hospital, I saw a woman who spends her entire life fighting for others. I saw a strength I have never seen before. And I realized." He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a low, intimate murmur, "that I wanted to be the one to fight for you." He reached out, his fingers gently brushing a stray curl from her cheek. His touch was light, tentative, but it sent a shockwave through her entire system. It was the first time he had touched her. "One dinner, Amara," he said, his voice a soft plea. "That's all I ask. No cars, no gifts. Just you and me. Let me show you the man, not the myth." She looked into his eyes and saw a loneliness that mirrored her own. She saw a man trapped by his own power, reaching for something real. And against all her better judgment, against every self-preservation instinct she possessed, she heard herself say the one word she swore she never would. "Okay." The dinner was a revelation. He took her not to some impossibly fancy restaurant, but to a small, family-owned Korean place tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. The owner greeted Jinwoo with a familiarity that spoke of years of patronage. Here, he wasn't a feared syndicate boss. He was just Jin, a regular customer. He talked about his childhood, about the immense pressure of his family's expectations. He spoke of a love for art and architecture that he could never pursue. He was witty and self-deprecating, revealing a dry sense of humor that she hadn't expected. He asked her about her dreams, about why she became a nurse, and he listened, truly listened, to her answers, his focus absolute. Amara found herself relaxing, opening up in a way she hadn't with anyone before. She told him about the crushing weight of her student loans, about her passion for helping people, about the simple joy she found in a quiet morning with a good book. For a few hours, they were just a man and a woman, sharing a meal, discovering the landscape of each other's souls. The carefully constructed walls around her heart began to crumble. The fear was still there, a low hum in the back of her mind, but it was being drowned out by a dangerous, thrilling new emotion. Hope. Their relationship unfolded slowly, cautiously, from there. Dates became a regular occurrence. He showed her his world, the breathtaking views from his penthouse, the quiet beauty of a private art gallery he opened just for her. And she showed him hers, the comforting chaos of a local diner, the simple pleasure of a walk in the park, the gritty reality of the city she called home. He was a man of startling contrasts. In his world, he was decisive, ruthless, a king on a throne of shadows. But with her, he was tender, patient, and surprisingly vulnerable. He would watch her with an expression of such raw adoration it made her breath catch. He never pushed, never demanded. He simply was present, attentive, devoted. One rainy evening, They were in her small apartment, sharing a pizza on the floor because her table was covered in Chloe's nursing textbooks. The power and wealth that defined him seemed to melt away within her four walls, leaving just Jin-woo. "I don't understand this," she admitted, tracing a pattern on the condensation of her water glass. "Us, we make no sense." "We make perfect sense," he countered, his voice soft. He reached across the pizza box and took her hand, his thumb stroking the back of it. "You are the anchor in my storm, Amara. You are the most real thing in my life." She looked at their joined hands, his, large and calloused, marked by a life she couldn't imagine. Hers, a nurse's hands, practical and capable. They didn't fit, but they felt right. He leaned in, his eyes searching hers, and kissed her. It wasn't a kiss of passion or demand. It was a kiss of quiet reverence, a sealing of a bond that had grown between them against all odds. It was gentle and deep, and tasted of promises she was terrified to believe in. She kissed him back, and in that moment she chose to ignore the shadows. She chose to believe in the man, not the myth. She chose to love him, but the shadows would not be ignored forever. They were a part of his world, a part of him. And they were closing in. The first crack in their fragile peace appeared as a headline in the morning paper. A rival businessman, a man known for his aggressive expansion into territories the Golden Dragon Syndicate considered theirs, was found dead. The police were calling it a gangland execution. Amara saw the article over Chloe's shoulder at the breakfast table. She felt a cold knot form in her stomach. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that Jin-woo was connected to this. When she saw him that evening, she couldn't hide the question in her eyes. He met her gaze, his own expression uncharacteristically guarded. "Did you have anything to do with what happened to him?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He was silent for a long moment. "He was a threat to my family, to my people," he finally said, his voice flat. "In my world, threats are eliminated." "You killed him," she stated, the words tasting like ash. "I gave an order," he corrected, his voice precise and cold. "It is not the same thing." "Isn't it?" she cried, taking a step back from him. The kind, gentle man who helped her mother with puzzles seemed to vanish, replaced by a stranger. A monster. "A man is dead, Jin-woo. He had a family." "He was a predator who hurt innocent people under my protection," he countered, his voice rising with a rare show of anger. "This is the world I live in, Amara." "This is the burden I carry. Did you think my money came from selling flowers?" The raw truth of his words hit her like a physical blow. She had allowed herself to live in a fantasy. She had seen the man she wanted to see and ignored the darkness that funded his beautiful gestures. "I can't," she whispered, shaking her head. "I can't be a part of this. I'm a nurse. I save lives. I can't be with someone who takes them." The anger drained from his face, replaced by a desperate, haunted look. "Amara, please. I keep you separate from it. I keep you safe. That world will never touch you." "It already has," she shot back. "It's touching me right now. I look at you and I see him. I see what you did." The argument ended there. A chasm of blood and morality opened between them. They spent the next few days in a tense, miserable silence, orbiting each other like wounded planets. Amara felt like she was being torn in two. She loved the man he was with her, but she couldn't reconcile it with the man he was without her. The breaking point came a week later. Jin-woo's uncle, a hard, traditional man named Dae-ho, who had always viewed Jin-woo's relationship with an outsider like Amara as a weakness, decided to force his nephew's hand. He saw Jin-woo's love for her as a liability that needed to be severed. Amara was leaving the hospital late one night when two men cornered her in the parking garage. They didn't touch her. They didn't have to. Their presence was enough. Their cold eyes and the bulges under their jackets, a clear message. "Stay away from him," one of them rasped. "You are a complication he can no longer afford." They melted back into the shadows, leaving Amara trembling, her heart pounding with a terror she had never known. It was no longer an abstract concept from a newspaper headline. The violence of his world had found her. It knew her name. It knew where to find her. She ran all the way home, bursting into her apartment and locking the door behind her. She didn't call Jinwoo. She couldn't. She packed a bag, her hands shaking so badly she could barely zip it. When Jinwoo arrived an hour later, summoned by a frantic call from Chloe, he found Amara sitting on her packed suitcase, her face pale and tear-streaked. "What happened?" he demanded, his eyes scanning her for any sign of injury. A dark, cold fury was building in his chest. "They found me," she said, her voice hollow. "Your people, or your enemies. It doesn't matter. They threatened me, Jinwoo." His face went rigid, a mask of controlled violence. "My uncle," he bit out. He knew instantly. "I will handle this. I will kill him if I have to. You will never be afraid again. I will protect you." And that's when she broke. The dam of her fear and her principles and her broken heart burst. "I don't need protecting." The words tore from her throat, raw and desperate. She stood up facing him, the suitcase a barrier between their two worlds. "Don't you understand? The only thing I need protection from is you, your life, your world. It's a poison, and it's seeping into mine." She saw the pain in his eyes, a deep, soul-shattering wound. He took a step towards her, his hand outstretched. "Amara, don't do this. We can fix this." "No, we can't," she said, her voice breaking. "I love you, Jinwoo. God help me, I love you, but I love myself more. I can't lose who I am. I can't become a woman who looks the other way." He stopped, his hand dropping to his side. The fight went out of him, replaced by a chilling stillness. "So this is it," he said, his voice flat. "I'm leaving," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm going to stay with my sister in another state for a while. I need to go somewhere you can't find me, somewhere your world can't reach." He didn't try to stop her. He didn't argue. He just stood there, watching his world crumble. And then he smiled, that slow, sad, devastating smile, the one that had frozen her weeks before in his penthouse. It was a smile of utter defeat, of a man accepting a fate he knew he deserved. "I understand," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. She had to leave then, before that smile broke her completely. She walked out the door, away from the man she loved, and didn't look back. The sound of her own footsteps echoed the shattering of her heart. The separation was a bleak, colorless agony for them both. Amara moved in with her sister in a quiet suburban town 1,000 miles away. She got a job at a local clinic. The days were peaceful, the nights were safe, and she was more miserable than she had ever been in her life. The world had lost its vibrancy. Food was tasteless, laughter was hollow. Every night she dreamt of his sad smile and woke up with tears on her cheeks. She had chosen safety, but she had sacrificed joy. She was a body without a soul. For Jinwoo, life became a descent into a hell of his own making. The light Amara had brought into his world was extinguished, leaving only the familiar darkness, now deeper and more suffocating than ever before. He dealt with his uncle Daeho, not with the swift violence he had promised Amara, but with a cold, brutal precision that left no doubt who was in command. He exiled the old man, stripping him of his power and influence, a punishment far worse than death in their world. But the victory was hollow. He threw himself into the syndicate's business with a terrifying ruthlessness. He expanded their empire, crushed his rivals, and made more money than he could ever spend. He was more powerful, more feared than ever. And he was completely, utterly alone. His penthouse felt like a tomb. The city lights were no longer a crown, but a cold, indifferent audience to his silent suffering. One night, months after she had left, he was standing on his balcony, looking down at the city. He caught his reflection in the glass. The man staring back was a stranger. His eyes were hard, his face a cold mask. He was the man his father had raised him to be. He was the king of his dark empire, and he had never hated himself more. Amara was the best thing that had ever happened to him, and he had driven her away. He had told her he would protect her, but his very existence had put her in danger. His world had poisoned hers. She had been right. A decision, clear and absolute, formed in his mind. It was not a choice between love and duty. It was a choice between a life with her and no life at all. He could not ask her to enter his world, so he would have to leave it. The grand gesture was not a single act, but a war waged on multiple fronts. Jinwoo Kwon began the systematic and violent process of going legitimate. It was a move that sent shockwaves through the city's underworld. He started by selling off the most illicit parts of his empire, the gambling, the loan sharking, the smuggling operations. He sold them to his rivals, an act they mistook for weakness. They came for him, smelling blood in the water. But Jinwoo was not weak. He was focused. He met their attacks with calculated surgical force, not to expand his territory, but to protect his withdrawal. It was a bloody, brutal few months. He used the darkness to fight the darkness. One last time, Minjun was by his side, questioning his friend's sanity but unwavering in his loyalty. "They will not stop," Minjun warned him after a particularly violent confrontation. "You are dismantling a century of tradition. Your father would—" "My father is dead," Jinwoo cut him off, his voice like ice. "And his world cost me everything that matters. We are building something new, something clean." He poured the blood money into legitimate businesses, real estate development, tech startups, a global logistics company. He established a charitable foundation, funding hospitals and community centers in the city's poorest neighborhoods. He was laundering his family's soul, scrubbing away the sins of generations with the very profits they had generated. He had to fight his own people, the old guard who, like his uncle, were resistant to change. There were betrayals, ambushes, and long, tense nights where he wasn't sure he would see the morning. He acquired new scars, both physical and emotional. But with every illicit asset he sold, with every legitimate company he built, he felt a piece of his old, heavy cloak fall away. He was becoming a man Amara could stand beside without shame. He was becoming a man who was worthy of her. Almost a year to the day after she had left, Amara was finishing her shift at the clinic. Her life was stable, safe, empty. She had accepted her quiet, lonely fate. As she walked to her car, she saw a man leaning against it. For a terrifying, heart-stopping moment, she thought the past had come back to haunt her. But it was Jinwoo. He looked different. He was still impeccably dressed, but the dangerous edge was gone, replaced by a quiet weariness. There were new lines around his eyes and a faint, silvery scar above his eyebrow that hadn't been there before. He looked like a soldier who had just survived a long and brutal war. She stopped a few feet away, her heart hammering against her ribs. She didn't know what to say, what to feel. He didn't smile. He just looked at her, his eyes full of a year's worth of pain and longing. "It's done," he said, his voice rough. "What's done?" she whispered. "The old world, the syndicate, it's gone," he said. He handed her a tablet. On the screen was a portfolio of his new life, news articles about his philanthropic work, the corporate charters for his legitimate companies, a public denouncement of his family's past criminal ties. It was all there, a tangible, verifiable dismantling of his entire former existence. "I couldn't ask you to join my world, Amara," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "So I built a new one that is fit for you." She stared at the screen, then back at his face. The sheer scale of what he had done was staggering. He hadn't just changed, he had waged war on his own life, on his own history, all for her. He had burned his kingdom to the ground and built a new one from the ashes. Tears welled in her eyes. The year of misery, of longing, of telling herself she had made the right choice. It all came crashing down. "You didn't have to do that," she choked out, though every part of her screamed that he did. "Yes," he said, taking a step closer. I did. A life without you is not a life. It is just waiting. I am not asking you to come back to me. I am not asking for forgiveness. I just needed you to know. He started to turn away, to walk back to his car, to leave her in peace with her choice. He had done what he came to do, but she couldn't let him go. Not again. Jin-woo, she called out. He stopped, his back to her. She ran. She closed the distance between them and threw her arms around him from behind, burying her face in his back. Don't you dare walk away from me again, she sobbed. He turned slowly in her arms, his own eyes shining with unshed tears. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping her tears away. Amara, he whispered, his voice breaking, and then he kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss of reverence. It was a kiss of desperation and starvation, of a year of missed heartbeats and lonely nights. It was the reunion kiss, a collision of two souls who had been torn apart and had finally, impossibly, found their way back home. It was a promise of a new beginning, a future built not on shadows, but on a love that had proven strong enough to change the world. Epilogue. 2 years later, the scent of coffee and fresh morning air filled the spacious, sunlit kitchen. Amara stood by the island, still in her pajamas, humming softly to the quiet music playing from a small speaker. She was no longer a nurse at a clinic. Jin-woo's foundation had funded the construction of a new, state-of-the-art community hospital in the city's most underserved neighborhood, and she was its head of nursing. She still worked, still fought for people, but now she did it with the resources to truly make a difference. Her student loans were a distant memory. Her mother lived in a beautiful cottage on their property, with a full-time caregiver and a garden that was her pride and joy. Strong arms wrapped around her from behind, and a familiar chin rested on her shoulder. Jin-woo, dressed in a simple t-shirt and sweatpants, kissed the side of her neck. "Good morning," he murmured into her skin. "Morning," she said, leaning back into his embrace. "You're up early. No corporate empires to build today?" she teased. "I have a far more important meeting," he said, turning her around to face him. His eyes, once so full of loneliness and shadows, were now clear and filled with a quiet, steady love. "A mandatory consultation with my wife about what to have for dinner." She laughed, a sound that was full and easy. "I'm thinking pizza, on the floor." He smiled, a real, genuine smile that still had the power to make her heart skip a beat. "My favorite." His new life was not without its complications. The past still had ghosts, and his name still carried a weight he would bear forever. But it was a clean life, a good life. He was a respected, if somewhat feared, businessman and philanthropist. The kingpin was gone, replaced by a man who had found his redemption not in power or money, but in the steadfast love of a resilient woman. He looked down at her, at the woman who had burned down his world and helped him build a better one. She was his anchor, his home, his peace. "I love you, Amara Kwan," he whispered, his forehead resting against hers. "I love you, Jin-woo," she replied, her heart full. The storm was over. They were safe in the quiet harbor they had built together. The story of Amara and Jin-woo teaches us that love's true power isn't in accepting someone's darkness, but in inspiring them to find their own light. It shows that redemption isn't a gift to be given, but a difficult, painful path one must choose to walk for themselves. True strength isn't about enduring a toxic world for someone you love. It's about having the courage to demand a better one, and the faith that they are strong enough to build it. We really hope you enjoyed this educational piece of content and hope that you could understand the moral lessons behind it. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more tales of love and redemption, and share it with someone who believes in the power of second chances. What did you think of Jin-woo's grand gesture? Was burning down his entire world the only way he could truly be with Amara? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And for our next story, who would you like to see find their own love story? Should we follow the ever-loyal Min-jun as he navigates a world without his old duties, or Amara's pragmatic best friend Chloe, who surely deserves a romance without all the Mafia-related drama? Vote in our poll and let us know.